Hey, this is the hard truth of Tony Shaffer, powered by 6 Hour, never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carry the best. You should carry the best. The best is 6 Hour. As a matter of fact, today, I've got out my M18 sidearm. Well, it's not quite. It's a civilian model of it, and I've got the Wilson Combat fabulous grips. And I've got, of course, the 17-round mag. Yes, it's loaded. I'm handling it carefully. Of course, when you get this, you can also get the 20. This, if you want to drive someone on the left nuts, get a 21-round magazine. Man, oh man, it's like you don't need 21 rounds to shoot things. Well, I don't know. Maybe I do. Well, who cares, right? Well, if Gavin Newsom thinks you should probably be carrying like 2 toothpicks and a comb to defend yourself. Just saying. And I don't think it's a good idea. But anyway, I digress. Back to the show. So we are on the America Out Loud podcast radio. We are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and the podcast network. And check us out, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com. And the older shows are on The Hard Truth with Tony. Also, we have one of our other sponsors, Swiss America. Call them to get a free copy of The Secret War on Cash. Well, it's not so secret. It's a war on cash. Obviously, you need to be aware of what you need to do, what you can do and should do to protect you and your family regarding hard assets in times of difficulty. And we're not out of the woods yet, even if a certain guy who looks a bit orange comes back into office. We need to be prepared for anything. So anyway, call them at 800-289-2646, 800-289-2646. Tell them Tony Shaffer sent you. Anyway, back to the show. Today, we are joined by the regular crew, Chris Cordani, the effervescent Cordani, the spectacular Elizabeth Breckenkamp, and of course the Yoda-like Jerry Corsi, Dr. Corsi, but he's unlike Yoda. He says things in ways that we can understand. He doesn't speak in riddles. So welcome back, Jerry. Good to have you back.
Great to have me back with you, Tony. Thank you very much.
So we're here going to talk about a number of things, but one of the things I want people to do is go pick up your latest book, which I picked up. I got this from Amazon, Jerry, just so you know.
Thank you.
The Anti-Globalist Manifesto, Ending the War on Humanity. Dr. Jerry Corsi. You will not be disappointed. This is a great book. It's third in the series, right? You've done 2 other books that we've already talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. So there it is. This is the third, and of course, it's got the forward from Steve Bannon. So you can't go wrong. So pick it up today. The Anti-Globalist Manifesto. So part of the Globalist Manifesto. See that 3 times, and in a Kamala Harris a language tone. Can I do that in like Ocasio-Cortez, ending the globalist agenda? Anyway, so part of their agenda is to actually interfere with voting. Well, they've been interfering with voting. So you are going to be talking today about some of the things that you've learned regarding algorithms, not algorithms. I don't think Al Gore has rhythm, right? Can you back me up on that, Chris? I don't think Al Gore has any rhythm.
He can't dance.
No.
Al Gore doesn't have the moves like Bill Clinton had.
That's right. So I don't know if he invented the internet or not. I don't think he did. But we're not talking about Al Gore rhythms. We're talking about algorithms, which is which is math. So and the left doesn't like math because it always goes against them. And this is another case of that, right, Jerry? So tell us about the God's 5 stones. We'll put that up for folks to look at, and tell us about what you're doing for the audience to understand.
Well, the main thing here is we're finding, and it's pretty shocking, that I think it's an intelligence agency operation. The states and the Board of Election, which is under usually the Secretary of State, maintain the official state voter records. The people these are the ones that are the voting records. That say you're eligible to vote and that you go in and supposedly be on that list in order to vote. They have algorithms built into it. They've got secret codes built into them. Now, this was found by a computer genius, Andrew Paquette, a PhD, who had been studying the New York State voter rolls and found that there were algorithms, which are secret codes that have been added into the New York State database at the state level. Now, what these codes do, and you can see Paquette's picture there. He's got the big beard, and he comes with the obligatory PhD beard, which I I had to.
The beard's a good thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
And he's a computer genius. He has a PhD from King's College in London in computer graphics. He's taught in Europe. He's had 2 books, computer graphics, published in Europe. He has worked on movies like Spider-Man. His credentials are impeccable. Yeah. And what these algorithms do is that they permit you to have false voters. In other words, you can create. It rearranges the numbering scheme from the state. It's like a card marking scheme. So if you're going to mark cards, the first thing you got to do is you got to take the cards out of the boxes and the cellophane where they come from manufacturers, because they're all ordered from the highest, suit to the highest card, to the lowest suit, the lowest card. And if you put in your marked cards, they're obvious because they're the cards that are out of order. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to shuffle the deck. And then you've got to create space to put in your false cards. So these schemes begin with removing the date you register is no longer the date that determines, it doesn't determine your voter ID. Okay, so in other words, it should be, if you come in first to register, you get voter ID number 1. If you come in 100,000, you get voter ID 100,000. But since the date of registration no longer is a variable that it determines your voter ID, all these voter IDs are free forming, they're freestanding, and they can be then assigned numbers and ordered according to the way the criminals want them ordered. Okay, so if, for instance, one of the schemes in New York along the line, and that creates 1,111 records between 2 people that came in sequentially to register to vote. Now, I'm going to explain that in common sense terms. Everybody knows that, for instance, the children are born. Your firstborn child is your firstborn child. People say, well, my 3rd child is good in music. Well, they know who their 3rd child is. And people don't get confused as the order of their children.
Right.
But you go to the state says, well, I'm sorry, but your first child is number 1. And your second child is number 12. Your 3rd child is number 23. The next child is 34. Next one is 45, and your 5th child is 56. So wait a minute, I don't have 56 kids. They say, well, in your record now there are 56 kids.
Well, P. Diddy does, but we're not interviewing about him.
We might have, yes.
56
and a lot
kids.
A lot of lube too, but that's a different story. Don't worry
in between your first and your second, we will admit as the state of New York that we put other people's children. And in fact, 3 of those records we just made up. Because you see, when you can insert records into a database out of order, and you can mix them up this way, all the records look legitimate. Just like when you shuffle a deck of cards and you put in the marked cards look just as random as all the rest of the cards. You can't tell that's a marked card.
Right.
Unless you know how the marking is done.
Right.
Okay, and so therefore, the first thing is to be able to get non-existent voters into the database. And in New York, we found that this scheme has about 300,000 records that are like this. And what they can be used for is mail-in voting. So that, for instance, you're coming along in an election and you see that Kamala, Pamala, whatever you want to call her, isn't doing particularly well. And so you start taking some of your non-voters, non-existent voters, and they have legitimate numbers in the state ID, because in the scheme, they get a legitimate state ID voter number. And you say, that person, we want to make sure that person's got a mail-in vote. And so they get it. That mail-in vote is run through the tabulating machines. Now, since the number from the person requesting the vote is legitimate, and that same number is on the mail-in vote, that mail-in vote is certifiable. It counts, even though the person doesn't exist. Okay, and with up to 300,000 of these, you can basically running this scheme, and the boards of election don't know these schemes are in there. These are put in surreptitiously by criminals who devised this scheme, and these schemes are truly intelligence agency complexity. So this is not some, scammer with a computer that wants to play some tricks on, voting. This is a professional operation, and it's an inside job. And I can say to you, I run this scheme. Let's say I'm the criminal. Do you want Kamala to win by 1%? Do you want her to win by 3%? Do you want her to win by 5%? Do you want her to surge in the afternoon? Do you want me to stop the voting? In the morning, I'll produce enough that she'll win. Because you see, no matter how the voting goes, I can always draw on my mail-in non-existent voters that I've created in the system.
Right.
To overwhelm any majority that Donald Trump has.
So, Jerry, 2 questions, because this you've found evidence. This goes back a long time. This goes back more than a few cycles.
Yes.
This goes back to probably about 2008, 2009,
2007.
So it's not always perfect, and because I want to make some observations here where the system wasn't prepared to adapt to the number of votes incoming to overwhelming, and I just go back to 2016. Obviously, Hillary Clinton thought she was supposed to win. As a matter of fact, she was confident, I believe, because she thought the fix was in. So, am I correct in presuming that whatever they dialed in wasn't sufficient to overcome the overwhelming number of votes that came in, and that's why it looks so awkward for them? Is that accurate?
I'm actually told in 2016 that the algorithm may have been used for Donald Trump, and Hillary is screaming around that
Interesting.
Part of her upset, I'm told, was that they didn't use the algorithm for her like she thought they were going to. Okay, and then she had been counting on that algorithm to push her over the top.
Of course.
Now, because I'm saying that if the intelligence agencies have decided that they're going to move from running foreign elections to running our elections, then voting has become a Truman Show. You think you're voting and you're not voting. Now, there are limits here. I mean, I think people say, well, I'm going to discourage people from voting by revealing this scheme. No, I think what it does is it demands that people now really get out and vote to make it harder to use these numbers. At some point or other, the numbers are just overwhelming.
Right.
And so therefore, if it is really a huge surge for Trump, this scheme won't work. And I do think what happened in 2016, although I'm not making any claims about any particular election being rigged or false, because I don't want to get into the trap of, the Kraken, and we can prove this and we can prove that. What I can prove is the algorithm is there.
Yeah.
And what I want to know is why is it there? How long has it been used? But certainly it explains Pennsylvania, which probably, it certainly looks like it was overwhelmed with Trump votes and had to go into crisis mode and just produce, as many as they could. Too many to be, you see them boxes arriving in the middle of the night, see all kinds of suspicious things happening, ballots being run through machines twice, mail-in ballots, etc.
Yeah.
And so therefore, again, the system has limits to how it's going to be used, but it can be used in down ballot elections, and it can be used in county elections, or so it could be used in local elections.
Right.
And what it does is it gives you the intelligence agency, the questions that have to be answered is how many people who've won elections since 2007 have this algorithm been used for? How many people have been in office that really didn't win if the vote were legitimate? And, in terms of remedies, to the states, for instance, I'm working with the state of, we work with Ohio. Ohio said, we've done a very good job. We've removed all the dead people. We removed all the people from our, who have moved. And I said, well, the criminals never planned to use those votes anyway. So you've cleaned up things that were not in play. They've created their own. The way they create them, these non-existing voters, is first of all clones. In other words, you take somebody's legitimate registration. Maybe they haven't voted in a long time, and you change the middle initial or you change the name slightly, you give them a new address and you've got a new registration. But that
Well, as part of,
registration is going to look normal if that's the only one you see. You're not going to know they have 20 of those.
well, does this mean that people who move out of state then are subject to having their name used in a state that they used to be in? Because I've heard that's happened as well.
That could very well be. I mean, again, any name. I think I again, this is a suspicion. I think
Yeah.
that the criminals pick dormant voters to clone. That they're not picking somebody who's an active voter because they don't want to take the risk that the person's going to show up and be told they've already voted. Although
Right.
that has happened.
Yes.
That does happen. And you say, could that happen? Well, this scheme is how it could happen. And what I'm finding is we've now found this scheme in 3 states. We found it in Ohio. We reported it to Ohio at the beginning of the week. We found it in New York and we found it in New Jersey. And I'm told that Andrew Paquette has found it also in Harris County in Texas. And we're looking at Pennsylvania. With the additional money we're trying to raise at God's Five Stones, I'm going to do what I can between now and the election to look at every state I can to identify these algorithms. And I think, Tony, what it means is, see, here's the Democratic scheme. And it happens in a couple of different ways. They want to get non-existent voters voting the way they want them to vote. So the goal is to get non-qualified people, non-existent voters on the lists.
Right.
So this is one scheme with an algorithm to do it and hide them, because just like the marked cards, you mark the cards where you know where they are in the deck, and then when you want to use them, you draw and use those cards. Okay, so you're the ones who create the cards as marked, you clones, or you can just make it up a whole cloth. You can take an address and just make up a voter for that address.
Yeah.
And I think that when they do these, like in Cuyahoga County, 20% of the entire voter registration in Cuyahoga County has occurred within the last 3 or 4 years. Well, they're ballot harvesting. They go into these communities and they get anybody to sign it, and that person then gets a legitimate voter ID number because the counties don't send somebody out into the field to do field surveying to see if that person exists. It's the same with mail-in votes. If the numbers match, that's a legitimate vote. So the scheme is not just creating fake voters, it's creating fake voters that can be certified.
Yeah.
With a fake number. You mean they're even just making up numbers? Like you said, they're pulling from their...
The numbers are real numbers. So, for instance, when I did that scheme about the children, all 56 children get a number. And they get a legitimate state number.
Even though they're not old enough to vote, right?
It doesn't make any difference, or even if they don't exist.
Well, they'll disappear anyway, right?
So,
put them out and disappear on cue.
Well, that's interesting that I'm glad you're explaining this, because that just made me think. Recently, I started getting mail, about voting. Are you registered to vote in my former name? Because I've been divorced and remarried, and I started getting completely separate stuff at the same address for Ann Walters. So that means if I wanted to, if I wanted to be like the Democrats and cheat, that means I could technically vote twice. I could vote under my real name as Elizabeth Breckenkamp, and I could also use the name because I've just been getting stuff for voting registration as Ann Walters. So I could vote twice. It's tempting, but I don't want to be dishonest.
And if you had 20 registrations and they were mailed to addresses where you could receive them, you could vote 20 times. And nobody's going to, and if you didn't exist, the computer could vote you.
Interesting.
That's
I got a question about that I really want to cover. But so you're telling me, Jerry, if I got something as Carlos Danger, I could vote for Carlos, right?
Yes.
So just, because I know Anthony Weiner and he's, he's no Carlos Danger, although he uses that name. But
just send pictures.
Yeah, just send pictures.
So how do we fix that? I mean, how in the world do we fix this? I mean,
so that's my connection. So Jerry, I want to ask, because someone then has to, you mentioned they could again, we're not accusing anybody, just for everybody's clear. We're not accusing anybody.
We're not accusing
But
anybody.
somebody has to be able to access the software and dial in the fix. So
Yeah.
where are you guys going with that part of the investigation?
Well, I think
Clearly,
first it's got to be an inside job.
right,
So
exactly.
my speculation
Clearly.
is that this is intelligence agency. It's okay. So some CIA creates a psych op unit, and they say we don't need elections anymore. We're going to control elections, and so therefore we're going to make sure that the candidate we want to win has polling numbers that would make it credible that they could surge and win at the end.
Right, exactly. Well, we talked about the polls before. So basically, let me make sure the audience understands the link here. So this is why I think that the polls were so wrong in 2016,
Yes.
2020. I think they're wrong right now. I think if you look at actual sentiment, let's just take an example of the Teamsters. The Teamsters, at the time we're taping this, the Teamsters voted 2-1, or is it 3-1, support President Trump. But instead of endorsing Trump, they said, yeah, we're just not going to endorse anybody, even though traditionally
Anybody.
they've, yeah.
Right.
So, but basically that was based on real people voting in real time, and it came up Trump. But I think other polls, like the AP poll, AP Maris just did one saying, oh, people are feeling bitter about Harris. Well, that doesn't mean anything. So I think the professional pollsters all try to create conditions to make people think, well, people really secretly support Kamala. So then people aren't surprised when the vote goes her way election day. Is that accurate, Jerry?
Yes, I think it's extremely accurate. And so so Biden was obviously, after that first debate, not going to be anywhere near Trump in numbers. So he had to be gotten rid of.
Right.
So Kamala is the one they pick. So Kamala, everybody hates Kamala. Even her staff hates her. I think even her dog bites her. I mean, everybody hates her.
The cats don't like her either.
Cats don't like
And Jerry
her.
Brown regrets being with her, just saying.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. And so they decide they're going to start gaslighting her. And so they start with these narratives saying that she's really catching on. Her ideas are now,
She's catching something.
Yes. Okay.
She's a fast learner. She's a fast learner.
Montel-itis.
Yeah.
Really fascinating woman, and okay. So, and then this is a narrative, which is a psych op. And of course, then you can always oversample polls. You can always pay pollsters. Political pollsters are just like Mockingbird Press would be happy to take money.
Oh,
Government comes around and says, I want this poll to show up. And by the way, here's our government badges, and we're the Department of Justice, or we're CIA, or we're whatever. And we'd like you to do this for us as a favor. I'd like this poll to come out like this. Okay. And again, you know which side the bread's going to be buttered on, and you know which side, you don't want to be accused of disinformation or refusing to cooperate.
Of course.
And so therefore, even in Europe, the first ballot in the European election, the conservatives, Le Pen, all these people were doing well. Then they said the left surged, the left woke up, and the left won the second ballot. Well, I called into Europe and say, are there people showing up at the polls? No, Dr. Corsi, there's nobody at the polls. The surge is happening in the computers. Okay, so I think these schemes have now become the way in which elections are stolen. And I think that the scrutiny needs to be on mail-in ballots. In other words, if we have mail-in ballots, we've got to go back to what we used to do, with make sure that somebody has a tight reason why they can't be present. An absentee ballot, there's a tight number control of that ballot. There's a tight receipt of that ballot. In other words, you know who the person is. It's not just this mass print ballots and get them out. Let everybody vote. Everybody needs to vote. Well, I mean, everybody needs to vote. You don't have an election.
Yeah.
Because elections are qualified people voting, and it starts with citizens. You can't bring in, a bunch of Haitians into Springfield, Illinois, and say, okay, they can vote. And so therefore, if my goal in getting these to the secretaries of state is to show them, and these are hard arithmetic proofs. In other words, I can show you the addition schemes. I can show you the ciphers that put the votes back into the deck.
Right.
I can predict the numbers
that are
coming out.
Yeah. This is not like algebra, which is a fraud perpetrated on us by the ancient Egyptians. Just saying. So
Mhm.
We're just clearing that up right now. But the other thing I want to hit, because
Oh,
to Jerry's point, our my old boss and Jerry's old friend, Dr. London, told me a story one time how a certain member of the U.S. government came to him and asked him to do a study, a well-funded study, Jerry. I mean, we're
Sure.
talking about a money that would have funded the London Center for quite a few years. But the catch was, we want you to come up with a certain outcome.
Right.
And Herb said, no, I can't do that. That's not ethical. But he turned down money that would have kept us funded for probably a decade. Think about that.
Well, I mean,
And I
that's
admired
yeah.
admired his courage to say, no, I'm not doing that.
Well,
And
see,
we would have become an extension of the federal government by doing that. Right, Jerry?
yes, if the elections become an extension of the CIA,
Yeah.
they have unlimited money in order to buy the result they want.
So another, just so you all know, I am actually a fan of Dr. Corsi because I've actually got his other books. I've got
There you go.
The Truth About Neo-Marxism.
nice.
Cultural
Okay.
Yeah. So I highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon where I got it. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the first volume was near and dear to my heart, which I got a degree in, The Truth About Energy and Global Warming and Climate Change. One of the things that's been done by the entire neo-Marxist community, the globalists, is to hijack climate change, right, Jerry? They've
That's
actually
exactly right.
hijacked it. So all these studies, we've got 10 years to live, and Ocasio-Cortez, according to her, because I go out at the moment I turn over my truck, I shorten Earth's life by 5 years, right? Every time I do that, it's like takes off 5 years of the Earth's life.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, the reason I'm saying is because they've taken and used a climate study funded to get the results they want, not the factual and scientifically sound results, right, Jerry? This is not just about elections. This is about them basically perverting science. And
We
Right.
are, what we're getting is we're living in a world of a Truman Show in which the science has been corrupted. The numbers have been corrupted.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in order to have a fair election, we're going to have to treat mail-in ballots as suspect.
Yeah.
In other words, I would recommend that before mail-in ballots are counted, even, that the samples are taken and you go out into the communities and find out if those people exist.
Yep.
Good idea.
So we
And-
need to do that. Anyway, we take a break
Yeah,
right now.
cool.
We'll be back after this short break with part 2 of the show. We have our guest today, Dr. Jerome Corsi, Jerry Corsi, author of the Anti-Globalist Manifesto, Ending the War on Humanity. And he's talking about God's 5 stones, a project he's working on right now. We'll be back right after this short break. Hey, this is part 2 of The Hard Truth of Tony Shaffer. We are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and on their podcast network. And we are powered by 6 Hour Never Settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I carried the best. You should carry the best. You better carry the best, or else you're going to be in trouble. And today I had out the M18. I'm telling you, you're going to be in big trouble if you don't have the best, because you want the best because you deserve the best. And the best is 6 Hour M18 with the Wilson combat grips. You cannot go wrong. Also, we are sponsored by Swiss America. Call to get a good deal. A good deal is a good deal no matter how you cut it. Call for a special Walking Liberty $50 offer, 800-289-2646, 800-289-2646. Tell them Tony Shaffer sent you. And we are Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.com. On X, we are at PRJ_Sentinel. That's us. And hear the past shows on thehardtruthofTony.com. And of course, shout out to our friend Cherie Curry. Cherie, I'm wearing her t-shirt today from her Japanese tour. And Godzilla didn't get her, by the way. She survived, just saying.
Good for her.
That's right. And she's chainsawchick.com, doing great things with a special called Leaving Amy. Another thing you need to check out on hers. And of course, she and Marie, her twin sister Marie, are having an event at Whiskey A Go-Go. What a great name that is, right?
That's a fun name.
It's better than that's right. It's better than Nancy Pelosi's vodka in a bottle Go-Go up in San Francisco. So say yes.
It's a great place to get hammered.
Nancy.
Yeah. Or Michelle Obama is what's her
Michelle Maybell.
Oh,
that's what Rush called her. Yeah, Michelle Maybell.
New drink or soda out, something or other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a fez. Yeah, something.
Michelle's. Yeah. I can't believe you smell like a Barack. Is the new cologne she has, right?
Ooh.
Ouch! Oh, that's gotta hurt. Ow!
All right, chef. Man, oh man, we're getting off track. We got to get back on track. Dr. Corsi, author of The Anti-Globalist Manifesto, Ending the War on Humanity, Dr. Jerome Corsi. It's on Amazon. That's where I got this. Anybody can go to Amazon and pick it up. I recommend you do. Anyway, Jerry's back with us for part 2 of the show. We want to continue our conversation regarding algorithms being in a variety of databases which manage the voter roll. So, Jerry, welcome back to part 2 of the show. Let's continue our discussions on this, because I think people need to understand there's things they need to start looking at to demand accountability. So you were saying right before the break that we need to examine how these things function by the fact there are loopholes and kind of vulnerabilities. So can you continue to tell us about some of those things you discovered in doing the research on this sort of thing?
Well, it's first of all shocking to when you find out that our state Board of Election voter registration rolls are infiltrated with codes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the last place you'd expect somebody to come in and put a cryptographic scheme. So once you find the code, and it's a renumbering code, it's like shuffling cards. And what it does is it allows you to create false cards, just like marked cards, and put them into the deck. So you've got non-existent voters, that are maybe clones of existing voters with a different address or a different name or some variation, but it looks like a legitimate card. It looks like a legitimate voter.
Right.
And you wouldn't know it's not a legitimate voter unless you saw that there's 30 others to the same voter or some other attribute that makes it clear that it is not legitimate. But it gets a legitimate state ID. And with that legitimate state ID, you've now got a pool of these, and there can be thousands of them, where whomever's running this computer scheme, and I don't even think it's clear to the people who are in the Board of Election that it's happening, because they're just thinking mail-in votes are getting voted. Okay, but if I pick out my criminals, I say, look, I need 5,000 here. Kamala Hamala is not doing very well. And I got a booster number. So therefore, I pick out 5,000 of my non-existent voters. I say, make sure they've all got mail-in votes. And then whether they get them or not, I can still run them through the computer as if they were tabulated, because my goal is to get my non-existent voters legitimately issued voter ID number, state ID number, to match the ID number on the outer envelope of the mail-in ballot. Now I've got a vote that can be certified, because it looks like a voter requested a mail-in, got it, voted it, the numbers match. That's a good vet. And so on a recount, on a certification, and in 2020, I said, they're not going to certify these elections. All these ballots floating all over. And I couldn't figure out how they did it. This is how they did it. The certification is the prize here. You have to be able to certify these mail-in votes. Okay, and so the key issue is that our elections run by intelligence agencies, which we know have been interfering in foreign elections since the 1950s. They bragged about it. They made a point of it. I think they've just decided they're going to move in now and run our elections. We don't need no stinking elections anymore. They're messy, and the wrong people win them.
Yeah.
And we as intelligence agencies, we know who's best to win elections, because we're going for the new world order, World Economic Forum, global government, in which we will be king of the hill along with M1 and Five Eyes, and we will rule the world.
Right. So I want to hit that real quick, because so much of what we've seen transfer around regarding the political parties is the departure of the neocons. Now, you and I have been friends a long time, Jerry. I'm not a neocon. You're not a neocon.
No.
But the neocons found a comfortable home in the Republican Party for a long time. And we knew who they were, and I don't know why we tolerated them for so long, but George Bush, 41, 43, the Cheneys, Dick Cheney before he dicks you, as they say. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just saying, if you do that sort of thing, we don't care. We're fine with that. But the idea here is that we've had this, I think, cancer within our ranks. But this cancer, then, I think, worked with the left to prepare and perpetuate the control of elections, both in foreign countries and here. So do you think maybe the neocons are behind some of this nonsense?
Well, certainly we've got perpetual war.
Yeah.
Perpetual war is what we're seeing now, and the only benefit of perpetual war are the arms manufacturers, the arms dealers, and the bankers. And the money that's made on these wars is tremendous.
Yeah.
And so therefore, between that and ruining the middle class, trying to have a depopulationist agenda, say there's too many people in the world, and clearly the intelligence agencies lying. How many lies have we been told? I did this book with David Mantik on the Kennedy assassination. Earlier this year, the optical density measurement of the X-rays. The X-rays show Kennedy was shot twice from the front. It's unmistakable.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then we say, okay, well, why do buildings that were not hit by the airplanes in 9/11, Building 7, why did it come down? Where were the weapons of mass destruction when we invaded Iraq in 1991 to get Saddam Hussein? Why was a bad flu made into a pandemic and a vaccine that doesn't prevent you from getting the disease? Fauci has the disease 9 times. He's been vaccinated.
Apparently, like short people, but that's a different story. We don't want to talk about.
But the point is the lies, the ability to control the media, to control the narrative, and once you control the narrative, you can architect the reality. It becomes a Truman Show. So I can see the intelligence agencies getting to the point where they could say, we don't care what the vote is. We'll run a simulation of the vote. And if we don't like the outcome, we'll just tabulate our simulation as the vote and say that's how people voted. And how would you know that wasn't the truth? How would you know?
Well, I think that's where I'm going with this. My next question is because this has to be comprehensive. It's not just elections. It's the media. It's many of the trends we see that show up that we follow. The zeitgeist, I think they try to essentially make it so that they try to put a soft edge on events so that they can create a narrative. But I would argue that people, because of the internet, because of citizen reporters, people like you, people who have actually stood up and said, and look, I think you don't get enough credit for having stood up against Mueller and those knuckleheads going against the Russia collusion narrative. Let's talk about that for a second, because if it wasn't for you, Jerry, people would have gone to jail and essentially validated because of intimidation the idea that President Trump colluded with the Russians. Am I correct on that?
They would have gotten Trump.
Exactly.
If I had taken the plea deal and
that's what I'm saying. So
Assange that I didn't have in order to not be tried by a jury in Washington, D.C. and put in prison the rest of my life, which is what they threatened.
Right.
That's what the FBI threatened me with. Or I could take this plea deal and just say I lied. And that would have meant if I had lied, I would be saying I did have a tie to Assange, which I did not have.
Right.
And that I had concealed it in order to protect Donald Trump and Roger Stone.
Right.
Well, that immediately would have made the case against Roger Stone and Donald Trump.
Right.
I refused to take the plea deal, and they closed down the Mueller investigation. They closed it down.
Exactly. So that was an example of a committed, very large scale process it was let's be honest here. It was a coup d'état. It was an attempted coup against the sitting president of the United States, perpetrated by a fake narrative started by Hillary Clinton. By the way, Hillary has been back at the time of us taping this. According to Hillary, Jerry, you, Chris, and Elizabeth and I should all be in jail because we simply don't buy into their false narrative, because that's what she's saying. What she says that the state should have the right to jail people who don't go along with what's said. So she's a very dangerous woman and probably doesn't smell too good either, just saying, but that's neither here nor there.
No.
But
it sounded to me that the entire Russian collusion came down to me. And, that they wanted me as the last one. And that I've said to the FBI, I thought you guys were good at profiling. I mean, you have to know that I'm not going to lie before God to stay out of prison, and that is not going to happen. But it ruins your life. I mean, it was a horrible. My life has not been the same since then, and it's not been better.
Oh, and they're doing it right now. I just met a guy the other night that's being investigated for the 6th January thing. Only 2 hours after the breach, he walked in, looked around, and left, and the FBI is now going after him in the federal court, trying to basically ruin him by forcing him to have very expensive lawyers and ruin his livelihood. this is what they do. This is their technique to get people to go along, no doubt.
But to get back to the voting,
yeah. Well, I wanted to make sure that
Right.
people understand it's more than just voting. There's a
More than
number of
voting.
things which
It's
link
a-
to
it all
yes.
fits together. In
Mhm.
other
Yes.
words,
Right.
That's my
this
point.
is a pattern.
Connecting the dots.
This is a pattern in which the intelligence agencies have decided to just run naked to the finish line. They don't care who sees them.
Well, don't say that in Hillary Clinton in the same
Run
sentence.
naked
for
to the
God's sake.
finish line.
No. Whew.
We do not want to see her
it's a
naked.
disturbing image. I know it's a
I don't
disturbing.
think Bill wants to see her naked. Really.
Jerry, I feel your pain, Jerry.
It's a disturbing
Don't say
image.
anything about Hillary naked. I have
I would like to
nightmares about
stand
that.
up for the
is
state of, I'm
terrible.
sorry, the Commonwealth of
Yeah.
Virginia, because like just 4 weeks ago, our wonderful Governor Glenn Youngkin had
I met the man. He's a good guy.
yeah, I have not met him personally, but it was about 4 weeks ago where they had this initiative. They were able to remove close to 80,000 dead voters
Yes, but
from
see,
Virginia's rolls. They also were able to remove about 6,000 non-citizens from Virginia's voter rolls, and then also
this won't touch the algorithms.
Yeah.
They're not planning to use those
A whole
votes.
different bird.
and 3 things he pointed out, and I wanted to pull it up. Youngkin said they will be the counting machines will be tested before the election, and the counting machines will not be connected to the internet. He did point that out, and that the ballot drop boxes will be monitored 24/7.
Yeah, those are not.
And I'm thinking, why don't all the governors do that? That's like
None
They
of
don't
these
want to.
measures- None of these measures will
But
stop.
that's what kills me. It's like
Elizabeth,
that just shows how dishonest they are when they
Elizabeth,
don't want to do that.
But it's a higher level fix, Elizabeth. What he's
None
saying.
of these measures that you just identified will stop the use of the algorithm,
Right.
because the algorithm is self-contained. In other words,
Oh,
the vote
I
is
got
made up illegally in the computer. The vote is selected for mail-in vote in the computer, and the tabulation of the mail-in vote is in the computer.
Yeah.
So these are not your typical. They want you to go after all. Oh, we've done a great job. We've gotten rid of all the dead people. Well, fine. We don't care.
that's good. That's a good
Our
start.
people, but it's irrelevant, because our people were not only not alive, they weren't dead. They weren't alive. We made them up.
Yeah.
Right.
Created
But I was
them
just thinking,
off as
he
computer.
said that the voting machines wouldn't be connected to the internet. So I thought that would, you're talking about the algorithm. I thought that would kind of help to circumvent that. But you're saying even if they're not. Huh.
When they say connected to the internet, they mean the internal system connected to external computers.
Right.
This could all be done in the internal system of the state board of election. They could do it on the mainframe. It could be done on the mainframe. It could be done by a small group of actors. It could be done over the entire phase of the election.
Yeah.
Or it could be done at the end. And it can be calculated to look like it's not happening.
Yeah.
The voters that are being used can be erased out from the database after they're used, and you can't find them.
Right.
Okay. So in other words, this is an inside job.
Yeah. So I think that's the important thing to understand, is that this is a higher level fix than what most people are recognizing as a threat, Jerry. And I think, again, I know this because, this whole thing with, at the time we're taping this, we just had gone through 2 days of the Israelis using very sophisticated attacks. See, it's like, I'm not surprised, because maybe I knew about this stuff back in the 90s, just saying. And so I think we have to recognize that unlike Kamala Harris, a lot of people have moved into the 21st century, 25 years into it, and we have to recognize that cheating has changed since 1999. So,
Tony, the advantage we share here is that we both understand how intelligence agencies work.
Oh yeah,
intelligence agencies never expected these algorithms would be found. That's number one. They expected that they were found, they could deny they exist. And they would, and then number three, they expect that the scheme is so preposterous that no one would believe it. And so therefore they can lie. And that's, but yet, the same as blowing up the cell phones or blowing up the pagers. I mean, who would imagine the Israelis have that kind of capability? Okay, well, they do. And the intelligence agencies combine it
Yeah, I
with a
wasn't
strike on.
surprised. Like, yeah, this is that we've yeah, it's like I was only surprised by the scale and how effective it was. It's like,
Yes.
man, someone did a great job
Well,
Yeah,
wiring that together. It's like,
and you
that
wow,
had
was
to go,
clever.
that
you
was
had to go to
lovely.
the manufacturers to get it done. You had to do all the
Oh yeah,
electronics to get it done. You had to
oh
have
yeah,
the capability to make it happen, trigger it when you wanted to. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's a sophisticated operation. See,
yep,
again, you go back
Mhm.
to if you want to penetrate a state board of election and alter the voting scheme so you can accomplish this, it begins with simple things by saying we're voter ID is not going to be a function of the day two register. So I can scramble the deck. I can shuffle the cards. And once I can do that, I can insert false records.
yep,
I can make kids look like they're your kids who aren't your kids. And then put them in there and give them real numbers as if they were your kids.
yep.
Now there's 56 kids in your kid file. So I don't have 56 kids. I've got 5.
Well, I think certain people do. I mean,
Yeah.
Bill Cosby probably has a lot of kids, but we're not talking about that.
Well, we're
So
not
that
talking.
means I could
No,
legitimately
Nobody
have
remembers.
multiple personalities, and all my personalities could vote as a separate person. as well.
I don't think, Elizabeth, 56 children are in the cards for any woman. I mean,
Well,
The old
maybe
woman who lived
I
in
don't
a
know.
shoe. Now, the
think,
old woman who lived in a shoe, she had a lot of
Sherry,
kids.
I don't know. I hate to bring this up, but Taylor Swift has cats and she considers them kids, so she's probably got 56 kids. Just
Well,
saying.
if she moves to the wrong place, they might be eaten. So that's another story.
That's right.
That's true.
Just
Yeah.
so just public service announcement.
Uh-huh.
Just say no to Haitian jerk kittens, please. Don't just say
Kitty
no.
cutlets.
Just say no.
Please don't eat the
Just say
kittens
Oh,
or the puppy dogs.
All right, Chris, we got something to do real quick because I got to go here soon too. So let's get
Tony's
this on.
takes.
What we do, we have a few minutes left, and we have to do our Tony's Takes, and that's always fun. Tony's
Yeah.
Takes is powered by Sig Sauer. Never settle.
Never
And
settle.
Never settle.
I don't settle. That's why I'm here working with you guys. That's the way I work with all of you. So here we go. Tony, Jerry, and Elizabeth, you're going to be very happy to note this. You know, we are saved. Connie Britton, Chelsea Handler, Jennifer Jason Lee signed an open letter urging Joe Biden and Harris to help bring the hostages home from Hamas. Now we're
Oh.
saved. I'm happy about that. What's your take, Tony? I mean, by gum, hooray! Saints be praised.
Well, I think what we are seeing now is revolutionary by the fact you have actors using their enormous power of persuasion to end conflict. I mean, this is a banner day. This should be a day that goes down in the annals of Hollywood. Can I say that? I guess I can say that as a day that Hollywood's finally using its power in a positive way, right?
Oh, I know how they could get the hostages out. They can start piping in all Joan Baez's songs in Gaza, and it would just drive them crazy and say, "Look, get out! We're letting you out." They just have to play her songs over and over again until they get so tired of her voice.
Well, that could be a cruel and unusual punishment. We
Yes,
Geneva
exactly.
Convention may say something about this here. Okay, so I'm not sure.
Not a fan of her voice at all.
All right, here's one for all of you. I want to get all your thoughts on this one. Ready, Tony?
Okay.
The Teamsters chose not to endorse Kamala Harris. That, my friends,
I said this earlier.
Yep, that, my friends, though, is a de facto endorsement of Donald Trump, in my opinion. But what's your take?
So I think the reason they didn't endorse Kamala is because I think she knows where Jimmy Hoffa is buried, and I think that it's going to come back up. So I think it's like if we endorse her, she's probably going to bring out Jimmy, and we don't want that. So I think look, I believe Marilyn Monroe, JFK, and Jimmy Hoffa are all in some hideaway in the Rocky Mountains. I think they're living out their days in the Rocky Mountains.
DB Cooper's funding that, right?
DB Cooper's helping serve them at night. So there you go. I take.
Well, the Teamsters are again. It's the labor unions are not supporting the Democrats the way the traditionally, because again, these Democrats are not. These Democrats are Marxists.
They are.
They are not. They're not traditional liberals. Traditional liberals have been thrown out of the party. These are radical Marxists. Then they have to. They want now this transgenderism. That's one of my new terms, transgenderism. We don't have just transhumanism. We have transgenderism. We got trans everything.
Yeah.
So and the mixing of there's only subjective reality. There's
Mhm.
my truth and your truth, and
Oh gosh.
Well, speaking of truth, so
I
I got
hate
it. So I'm going to do an audible here since this is my show.
Speak your
So
Ah.
Jerry, I'm going to do a riddle. I'm going to do a riddle for the three of you to answer. So I got a riddle. So who could swim further out to sea without drowning? A, Hillary Clinton. B, Kamala Harris. Or C, I don't know, but it's worth trying.
well, Hillary could float a great distance out. She's got enough body weight. She could get wrapped.
That
Well, I think
was-
C is the answer
I
because
don't
we
know.
don't know who would win, but it's worth trying because one of them ain't coming back. Just saying.
Well,
So.
here's the thing. Kamala Harris did try this. She actually swam halfway across the Atlantic Ocean. Then she thought, well, wait a minute. I don't think I could make it. And she swam back.
That makes sense.
All right.
But,
One more for all of you here. Ready? Okay.
Quickly.
You've listened to Kamala Harris's accents. She's had a
Yes.
Latina accent. She's had a street accent, a
Mhm.
sister accent, a
Yeah.
white Southern accent, and more. Well, what do you think she'll try to imitate next? Will she be Norwegian, a 50s greaser like Squiggy? I can see her going in and saying, hello, British,
Yeah.
Borg. It's only a matter of time before this woman leads off a rally with Nanu Nanu. What's your take, Tony?
No, I think she's going to go for Vulcan next. She's going to do the Vulcan neck pinch on Waltz on Tim.
oh
he's-
my.
That guy has to
I'm
shut up.
voting for Cyborg. She'll be
Cyborg. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, a cyborg. Yeah. I can see that.
So anyway, we got to roll. I got to get going because at the time we're taping, I got to do some more work. But Jerry, Dr. Corsi, thank you for being here. His new book is the Anti-Globalist Manifesto: Ending the War on Humanity. What we've been talking about today, God's Five Stones, is related to what he's doing to try to get people.
A lot of data on all the
data.
wilderness.
So anyway, I got to run. I got to jump off. Good seeing you all. We'll see you next week on The Hard Truth.
Bye.
Okay, guys, I got to jump off because I.